Greetings. Welcome back to Deep Images. We are still assailing you with strange love stories. I'm Henry Covert. I'm here with co-host C.F. Roberts, a man with the best, and Briggy Williams, aka Funky Lollipop, and our panelist supreme, Bill Mulligan, is going to talk about a strange love story.
Strange love stories. So this movie's strange in a few ways. The love story is kind of cute. It's the filmmaking that's really strange and the way they tell the story. And this is 2010. Wow, 2010 doesn't feel that long ago.
I know.
Scott
Wow.
Pilgrim versus the World. And this movie is based on a comic book, a graphic novel series by Brian Lee O'Malley. It was quite successful, and they obviously loved it, and they made a movie, and they decided they were going to make a movie that is true to the comic. It's actually more true to the vibe of 2010 video games, like 16. The stuff like Capcom.
Hmm.
Those what was that game that everybody loved so much? It's the 2D fighting game. It's right on the tip of my tongue, but it's late and I'm tired. These kind of video games where it's just two characters smashing each other, and it's so fast. I'm getting like ADHD
Grand
just
Theft
watching.
Auto.
What was
I
that?
don't know. I was like Grand Theft Auto. No, it
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
that. Oh,
I'm
yeah. It
weak
was
on video.
Mega Man?
no.
Double
It's
Dragon? No, I'm kidding.
no. It's boy. Yeah, I'm gonna get this people
Now
screaming.
you're talking my school, Double Dragon.
There's people absolutely screaming at the thing right now. How could you not know?
put
Yeah.
it in the
It's-
comments. Tell us, because
Yes,
Yeah, there you go.
gamers, tell us what it is out there.
please,
Tell me what an
gamers,
idiot I am.
enlighten
No,
Um,
us.
don't tell him that part. Just tell us
It
what the
was,
game is.
I just know it
Gamers,
was
let
by
us know.
Capcom. So this
Like,
movie,
subscribe.
Yeah, do that
it's
too.
it's directed by Edgar Wright, one of our best directors out there, and it doesn't look like anything else, and it doesn't look like anything else probably for a while because there's no getting around it. This movie bombed. It lost money. It cost a good 60 to 80 million, depending on who you talk to and how many credits it got, how many tax breaks, and it brought in about 50 million. So it lost a lot of
I didn't
money.
know that. It was
Um,
super hyped. It was everywhere ads were everywhere.
yeah, see, I thought that the marketing wasn't good, but it may be that they hyped it. They just didn't hype it well. It didn't look like something I really wanted to go out and see.
Yeah. Same.
But then when I finally did see it, I'm like, well, I wish I'd gone there and bought a ticket. Would have made a little bit of difference. It's about a slacker played by Michael Cera, which this was a good time for him to be playing that.
And Peaks is Michael Cera.
Yep. He's in a band. He's with his friends. It's that generation, and it's easy for us to sit back and like, oh, they're terrible, and their music, it's just noise, like everyone else. He's dating one of his friends. People aren't too into that, but then he meets a new girl, Ramona, and Ramona is played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead at her most adorable. This is the manic pixie girl of every guy's dreams. She's big, she's got big eyes, she's totally out of your league, but for reasons we can only wonder about, she is into you. So he kind of monkey branches from his girlfriend to this one.
Monkey Brain.
And monkey branching, I love that description. If you don't know what that means, monkeys, when they go from tree to tree, do not let go of the first branch until they grab onto the second one.
This is getting
Many
kinda deep.
people, yes, many people in their romantic situation play the same game. Now, I'm of the opinion that if things aren't working out, break up with that person and give them a chance to go to someone else. Don't humiliate them by looking for other prospects while you're still with that person.
Right.
Be a man or a woman or
I call
whatever
it
you are.
dovetailing.
There
I call
you
it
go.
dovetailing. There you go.
Yeah. It's a
Mhm.
sleazy move.
Before you get rid of one, line up a new one.
Yeah, I disagree. Just be good
I
about it,
disagree too. I disagree. I digress.
Yeah, but anyway, that's our opinion. What do we
Henry,
know?
we gotta talk.
Insecurity. Terrible insecurity.
So he starts dating Ramona, but there's a problem. She has 7 evil exes, and he has to battle them in turn, one after another, and each one of them. So here's where the movie gets kind of crazy. These battles are like video games. and we are watching a live action video game complete with points and cool effects, all kinds of things. It's really crazy. And I think that's where the movie had a hard time reaching an audience. And it reminds me of another one that a lot of people like, and I do not, but I think it had the same problem, and that was Speed Racer.
I didn't like it at all.
Yeah, I didn't like it at all. A lot of people disagreed, and they said, one day this movie is going to be considered a classic. Well,
Hasn't
that day
happened
hasn't
yet.
come yet. Hasn't happened yet. I thought it was just too much. I love special effects, but these seem like special effects for the sake of special effects. And you could argue the same thing here, but I would disagree because it is consistent with the world that takes place here. That we're seeing the way these characters see things. I don't know if they're literally, when they punch someone, everything freezes, lights go on, and coins start falling, but that's how it feels in their head. And of course, each of these X's is like a superhero. This is basically a superhero movie. There's no origin. This is just the way things are. Right. And characters have powers and can do things. And it's a lot of fun. The ultimate.
How does Scott fight them, though?
He fights them with the power of music and love, and sometimes punches.
Okay.
It just, and I like movies like this. It's like to something that would probably never be compared to this movie, El Topo, where it's just characters wandering around fighting each other, but it's not. They don't just punch. I mean, they're different. Each one's different. There's a guy who catches bullets with a net, and there's a guy with no arms tied, where he's got arms but he's got no legs, tied to a guy who's got no arms but he's got, like, I don't know, whatever. It makes it interesting. And so it's a lot of fun. It's a visual treat. Edgar Wright is a terrific filmmaker and a very visual filmmaker, and he was having loads of fun. The love story actually works. Okay, so Scott's a bit of a jerk. He's young, he's immature. He cheats on both of his girlfriends, which he ultimately admits to, and that's part of his growth as a character. By the end of the movie, he has defeated the exes. He is the hero, but more importantly, he's come to understand his own growth. It's not really, the fighting is more symbolic to get to where he needs to be. They kind of tacked on a happy ending because they originally went with the original ending of the manga, or I guess it wasn't really manga, of the comic book. But then the comic book guy, people weren't happy with that ending, so he wrote a new ending, and they went and made a new ending for this, more consistent with that. And that's fine. We've been through this whole thing. Give us a happy ending, for God's sakes. It's not a 70s vampire movie. Give us something. But I really like it. Winstead she's so adorable. And Sarah, who can, he can be good in the right roles, is very good in this one. A little of him goes a long way, but I generally like his stuff. Now look at this cast: Michael Cera, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Kieran Culkin, Anna Kendrick, Brie Larson, Aubrey Plaza. Let's see, Chris Evans, Brandon Ruth, Bill Hader. This is an amazing cast.
Some of that was stunt casting in comic movies.
Yeah. There's some really good stuff here, and it has. It's now considered. It's although it lost money, its reputation has grown in time. It's now considered kind of a what they seem to call a transmedia sort of thing, because it's a movie, a video game, comic book, a lot of influences go into this and work pretty well. The 2020 it got a re-release because it was the 10th anniversary, and it is definitely one of those films that although it didn't do well, people who saw it really liked it and influenced. I think is one of those films that will be seen as an influence on other filmmakers, when they talk about, hey, yeah, I just won the Academy Award, how'd you get here? Well, the movies I loved. And then they think this will be one of those ones in there. It's one of those things, sometimes a movie comes along and you're like, man, I really like the way that movie looks, but I don't necessarily want every movie to look like this.
Right.
So like when 300 came out, I loved 300, but I didn't want very many or maybe any other movie to look like 300. That look worked for that story.
Right.
But when they tried to do it with the spirit, Well, Sin City also looked good. I mean, these
I didn't like
movies.
Sin City.
I like Sin City, but by the time they came out with the sequel or the sequel to 300, people had forgotten all about it. It's like, why do these movies look so weird? It's a cool look, but sometimes cool looks have to be for the right thing. I loved Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow. Boy, did that
Pretty
die
good.
on the vine.
Yeah.
But and there's no and a lot of folks when it came out, they're like, this is the way movies will look in the future. I'm like, no, this is a good look for Sky Captain.
Right.
This does not need to be the way we film other films. The things should have an integrity. A look for a film should have a certain reason for the way it looks.
Yeah,
So
looks for a lunchtime, not looks for a lifetime.
and I have seen people complain that Scott Pilgrim was just too frenetic and crazy and strictly for the kids. That's not true. I'm not a kid. I found it very enjoyable. I think it's a lot of fun and definitely worth watching. And the love story is sweet. It's a sweet love story with a good reason for some cartoon violence and conflict. It's a good story. I like it. It's a good movie. Watch it. If you're not one of the Scott Pilgrim fans yet, give it a shot. And then you might want to seek out the comic book, which is probably superior because it's a lot easier to get some of that background. I've been told by people who are really into the comic, they were upset that some of the secondary characters did not get the full attention that they deserve. But that's the nature of writing versus cinema. You've got an hour and a half, 2 hours at the max. Something's got to give. Yeah. And it's often those secondary characters. The secondary characters in this are very good. It's quite progressive. Scott's roommate is gay, and that is just not at all a deal. Not at all. There's nothing about it, which to me is way more much more positive message than these movies that try to spoon feed you or just shove it down your throat. It's like, yeah, okay, thank you, I'm being lectured to. And I think the natural reaction to people when they're being lectured is to just cross their hands and just say, just ignore it at best and maybe go against it at worst. It can actually work against you.
Yeah.
It takes a certain amount of skill to write real characters and not have them. I mean, I have a lot of gay friends, and most of them, it's not the most important, most interesting thing about them.
Right.
Yeah.
I will say among the younger generation, there is this tendency sometimes to within 5 minutes of meeting someone and talking, and we're discussing, whatever crazy stuff we're talking about, I come to know their entire life. They are way too quick to tell me their sexuality, their mental state, the various pills they take, how they feel about their mom.
It's a widespread epidemic.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And then you meet them the second time and you like them because none of that stuff really matters. And you get it again. You realize this is basically
they are.
Yeah. Well, but it's not who they are. I mean, well, it is.
Well, it's who they're limiting themselves to a bunch of labels.
Yes. It's not the most interesting thing about them. Right. And I think so many of them see this identity politics as what defines them. And it's like
as a religion. Almost.
Yeah, being gay is not interesting.
A religion.
Yeah. There's a lot of people out there that are gay. There's a lot of people that are Catholic. There's a lot of people that are that. If that's the main thing, the thing that you lead with, it sends the message that you're not very interesting because that's not that interesting.
I think it sends a message of your I don't want to know about your sexuality. I didn't ask. I'm not interested. So if you're going to tell me that you're gay to me is like me saying, hey, I'm heterosexual. You did not ask to hear about my sexuality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. We're not intimate that way, and we are not interested in each other that way. So why are you telling me that you're gay? Does it further the relationship? Are you sort of putting up a wall?
Well, there's a feeling among, and I'm not going to say gay because it's definitely sub pockets of LGBT, but it is, and they're compelled to tell you they're queer, trans, and or autistic all the time.
I think a lot of that boils down to a generational thing, though. I think
maybe
there is a shift coming, and
certain kids of a certain age who basically they're kind of got brought up in this whole thing where that identity pretty much defines who you are.
Hello, everyone. We're back with Deep Images, and we're still covering our topic of strange love stories. That encompasses quite a lot of different kinds of films. I have with me two co-hosts, Justin Cotton and C.F. Roberts, the lovely Briggy Williams, the amazing Bill Mulligan, excuse me, and our very special guest panelist, the awesome Tanya Atomic. So yeah, so we're here, and I don't know, we're like the Super Six or something. So our next contestant on is going to be Justin discussing. Well, I'll let him tell you.
Well, good evening, and I'll do a film that most people will have seen. It's a classic from 1967. Faye Dunaway and Warren Beatty star in Bonnie and Clyde, based on the real life gangsters from 1931 to about 1933 when they were executed by the law enforcement. It's an Arthur Penn directed film in color, obviously, about 1967. Also stars some big name stars and cameo roles, if you like. Gene Hackman plays Buck Barrow, who's the older brother of Clyde Barrow, the main character. A bit of a cameo over about 10 minutes, 2/3 of the way through the film, which I think was his first feature in a motion picture film.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
If you like Gene Wilder, he's good in it as well. There's also Estelle Parsons, who won an award for Best Supporting Actress playing Blanche Barrow, who was the wife of Buck Barrow. Apparently Warner Brothers was sued by the real Blanche Barrow because she thought that Estelle Parsons' rendition of her made her look like a, quote, horse's ass.
Oh my God.
So she was very unhappy, even though she was a consultant on the film back in 1967 when the film was made, and she was obviously still alive until the, I think, late 1980s. But Estelle Parsons won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. There was 2 Oscar awards for the film, and out of 8 nominations. And it's got an amazing soundtrack with is it Earl Scruggs and Lester Flatt's type sort of jingly country-ish hillbilly type, like the Beverly Hillbillies soundtrack. It's the same thing throughout the film. So in terms of the strange love angle, there's no doubt, as in real life, also in the film, there was a love relationship of sorts between Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker. But out of the 2, and I don't know if this is true to life, but it may have been, but in the film, certainly Faye Dunaway's Bonnie Parker is shown as the more sexually aggressive or sexually active of the 2. And mysteriously, Clyde Barrow, played by Warren Beatty, is standoffish and almost fights off Bonnie in a couple of scenes, including right near the start after a car chase, which is about 15 minutes into the film. In the back of the car, they become romantic or intimate briefly, but then he sort of pushes her away. And she says to him, "Well, what's the problem? Do you prefer men? You know?" And he denies that, of course. He denies it straight out. But having read up about the real Clyde Barrow, there is a suggestion by some historians that he was either bisexual or gay. And it goes back to his time in a juvenile prison where there may have been some sort of sexual activity he was involved in, whether consensual or otherwise.
Wow.
And he also had a friend of his in that detention center, may have been to get away from somebody or because of the hard labor, chopped off 2 of his toes so that he would be too injured to work at this hard labor prison camp in order to get away from that prison camp. But other historians say, well, there's no real evidence that he was gay or bisexual, and that may be just an urban myth, if you like. But in the film, they were thinking at one point of having a bit of a romantic interlude between Clyde Barrow and the driver, C.W. Moss. But then the censors at the time in 1967 felt that was a bit too on the nose and wouldn't go down well with audiences to have even the suggestion of a same-sex interlude in the film.
Interesting.
So in the end, the film portrays it as they very much love each other. And in fact, after the car chase scene, when he says, I'm not really ready for this, and Bonnie's very unhappy with this, he basically says, well, our relationship will be more about sexual intimacy. We still love each other, or would still love each other. If you're into a stud service, you can meet anyone in town in West Dallas who would give you that, but you'll get more than that with me, and we'll have adventures. We'll go forth, and you're worth more than that. You're worth more than that. So she kind of accepts that, and
romantic in a way.
And then the film starts. So there's a romantic. I wouldn't say it's platonic, but it's a loving romantic relationship.
Yeah.
Whereas he's not really sexually active, and he's almost played as impotent during the film.
That's probably.
And again, some historians have said there's no evidence that he was actually impotent in real life, but that was the way it was effectively portrayed in the film. So it kind of leaves it open in the film as to why he's so sexually shy in terms of intimacy. And also another scene, probably halfway through the film, where they're in a motel room. It's almost as though she becomes so sexually forthright with Warren Beatty's Clyde, and again he tries, but he's just not interested, and you can kind of see the shame on his face that he cannot give her what she wants at the time, and she turns away and looks sort of devastated. But then they kind of the next day they just move on as though nothing's happened, and by this stage he's kind of accepted that we're a couple, we love each other, but he can't give me that intimacy. Okay, so moving on to the actual storyline, I think everyone's probably quite familiar with it, but it opens with it's supposed to be in 1931. Bonnie's living with her elderly mother. She looks out a window of the bedroom and sees a young man in a suit. Looks like he's attempting to steal Bonnie's car or Bonnie's mother's car. She goes out and confronts him about that, and they head off into town, where Clyde soon thereafter robs a grocery store, and hence the car chase at the start of the film. So before long, they're involved in heists involving other grocery stores. They stop at a gas station and meet a young man, C.W. Moss, who somehow decides to join them from the get-go and jumps into the back of the car. And he effectively is trained as a getaway driver who proves to be quite inept when they try to hold up a bank in the local town. Again, somebody is shot on the way out of the bank. So the first person is killed. And I think there's another bank heist a bit later on where one or two policemen are shot as well. So by this time, they've become fugitives known as the Barrow gang. Just about a third of the way through the film, they meet up with Clyde's older brother, Buck, played by Gene Hackman, and his wife, Blanche Barrow, and they then stay at a motor court. They become part of the gang, and halfway through the film, they stay at a motor court where a young man who delivers groceries to them becomes suspicious of the group holed up in the motel room. And it's although it's a 1932 or 33, so it's a long time before mass media or social media or TV news. They're the talk of the town across the whole country, basically across state lines, about one of these 1930s era gangster gangs that have killed a number of people. So they're very high profile nationally.
Right, they're on the radio everywhere.
On the radio, yeah. And so, this is very much a film, and it's one of the reasons I love the film, actually, is it's very much of its time in terms of the period piece in the 1930s and the Depression era. But the film does kind of glorify them in a way that some people may see differently. And we have the same thing in Australia with Ned Kelly in the 1880s, where he's effectively glorified by popular culture, whereas people who are descended from police who were shot and killed by the Kelly gang see things entirely differently and say, well, this is a person that's effectively today would be seen as a terrorist and should not be glorified. So you're getting kind of a friendly media story about Bonnie and Clyde in this film, I believe. So after this young man delivering the groceries, he tips off the police. The police then raid the motor court. There's a shootout, which is, probably one of the most action-packed scenes in the film. As a result of the shootout, the resulting car chase, a number of other police officers are shot and killed, but also Buck Barrow is shot and wounded, eventually passing away. And Estelle Parsons' character, Blanche Barrow, is shot in the eye and becomes blind in one eye, which I believe is true, is actually what happened. So she's arrested, and she gives away a secret about one of their companions, C.W. Moss, to a Texas Ranger played by I think someone Pyle, Denver Pyle, best known in later years as Uncle Jesse in The Dukes of Hazzard.
Yeah.
So he plays a very good role as not as Uncle Jesse, but as that was a great show, but as the sort of vengeful Texas Ranger. And the reason he's so vengeful is that he comes across a little bit earlier. He comes across the Barrow gang near a swamp in Missouri, so he's gone across state lines, and he's apprehended by the Barrow gang and basically humiliated and I think pushed into the water and something like that. So he ends up bedraggled, sopping wet. So from that moment on, he goes back to Texas and he's got it in for the Barrow gang more than he did before. And so he basically interviews the temporarily blind Blanche Barrow and manages to get some information out about their driver, C.W. Moss. He then tracks down C.W. Moss's father. And it turns out that Bonnie and Clyde, who are now, along with C.W. Moss, the last three of the gang, are staying with that family. And hence they're able to manipulate the scene whereby the car is broken down at the end and Bonnie and Clyde's car coming around the bend offer to stop to help C.W. Father to basically change a tire or to repair his car. So there's then a very full-on scene, which when I first saw the film when I was about 12 or 13 years of age, left an impression on me. And it was quite shocking in terms of its violence, in terms of the machine gun execution of Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah.
So it's quite a graphic scene. I just read online that the editor of the film was influenced in some way by Seven Samurai in terms of the change between slow motion and real life motion, which effectively made it look as though the bodies were dancing, as they were riddled with bullet holes. So there was some Seven Samurai effect in some way in the editing of that scene, that last scene at the end.
It also fed into the Wild Bunch the following year, the style of that movie by Sam Peckinpah.
So I think that film also plays into a bit of the sympathy angle towards Bonnie and Clyde, and that it was such a shockingly violent scene. And it also, I hear, also was a watershed moment for Hollywood in terms of more violent scenes thereafter, because this film was only 1967. But there was also a ballad, the Ballad of Bonnie and Clyde, which was written by Bonnie Parker. In fact, it's true in real life that she did write this poem, which effectively foretold her death. And that poem was given to her mother some 2 weeks before their execution-style killing. And she talks about how, one day we will be apprehended, we will be killed, and then they will lay us side by side. And some will mourn our passing, and others, like the police, law enforcement, will be relieved, but there will be no more Bonnie and Clyde from that point. So, she said it better than me in the poem, but it sort of leaves kind of a Romeo and Juliet type, I suppose, tone to her ballad writing. So it's a story of two characters that are on the wrong side of the tracks. They're I guess, anti-heroes, but they are very much in love. But it's not a love that had much intimacy in it. And I don't know whether that was true in real life, but it's certainly the way it's portrayed in the film.
Okay.
I have seen the car I thought was the actual car that they were, which was riddled with bullet holes in Washington D.C. when I went to the Museum of Crime and Punishment, and they had this replica a vintage Ford car. Which
does that really exist?
Yeah, and I thought, well, maybe that's the actual car, and it kind of led you to believe it was. But then I read online this morning that the actual car's still around, and it's in Whiskey Joe's Casino in Las Vegas. So that's where it actually is. But I did see a replica of that car
Okay.
The Ford cars are very much a part of the film, the vintage Ford cars. I saw a replica at a museum in Washington, D.C. And another funny story was Warren Beatty wanted to make the film a certain way, certain sort of film noir way, and the director of Warner Brothers didn't agree. Jack something or other, who was the head of Warner Brothers at the time, So they were arguing about this in the office, and Warren Beatty said, "Well, I'm the producer, so I should have some say in this film." And Jack, from one of the owners of Warner Brothers, pointed out the window to this big water tower, and it had the Warner Brothers sign on it. And he goes, "This is my studio, so I get to say how this is done." And Warren Beatty said, "But that says WB, and those are my initials."
Oh God.
So in the end, the owner of Warner Brothers went along with the way that Warren Beatty wanted the film to be shot. So that was I thought it was quite a funny story.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And
but I'm sure.
okay.
Sorry, what's it?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm sure everyone's seen the film, but I thought I'd do it from that angle in terms of the strange love angle, which is I think was very much a standout of the film.
Any of you guys enjoy this film or have seen this film?
I did see the film, but it was like quite a while ago, and I was certainly struck by that last scene where they were basically, guns down. Um, and back in those days, when those types of movies were made, yeah, you had to die like a violent death. But I understand that is actually, in many ways, how they were captured. I also understand like that was the beginning of the Hollywood rating system, because of
Yeah,
that
help
film.
prompt it. Yeah.
Yeah, because the violence was so horrific, that it was just so shocking to what Americans had seen up until that point.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, European
so,
movies were already that violent, pretty much.
yeah, but the difference between European movies and American movies is that European movies, they know that's a fantasy. You know what I mean? That's the difference.
Well,
They
that's
know
one of
it's
our
make-believe.
mantras. It's one of our mantras on here. It's fiction.
Right.
People get
They
so
know
freaked
it's
out.
not real.
Didn't really.
It's
Exactly.
like those people who watch the superstars of wrestling, Vince McMahon, and they think, "Oh, it's all real."
Of
I don't
course.
even know if
They're
he's
just
Wait,
real.
what?
they're just actors. Yeah.
You
You
mean
could,
it's not real?
What are you saying?
Vince
How
Sorry.
dare
McMahon, he
you?
might be, he might be a digital creation like Max Headroom. He might not be real. I'm joking. But this is where we're headed with AI and everything. And
This is a great film. Bonnie and Clyde's a great film. That ending really
Yeah.
does stick because you've gotten to know these people and to see them just so violently butchered here. Now, when you find out the real story of Bonnie and Clyde, they were awful. They killed. I think they know of at least 13 people they killed, which that puts them up there on the
for back
list
then,
of
especially.
spree killers. That's
Yeah.
a pretty big chunk of dead people. And I found it interesting. When I start looking at these things, and now you're starting to you're a teenager, you're questioning everything. It's like, why is Bonnie and Clyde, this romantic story? And the Manson family, they're a bunch of creeps. Nobody writes any romantic movies about the Manson family. They killed a lot less people than Bonnie and Clyde. And the difference is Bonnie and Clyde killed a bunch of cops and clerks. They killed regular people,
They killed, right.
And the Manson family killed Sharon Tate.
They killed
And that
elitist,
shows you the
elite,
value that we put on lives, that pretty celebrities are worth more than some guy who just didn't shove the money in the bag fast enough, and so he got shot in the face.
It sounds very reminiscent of our times as we're going through them today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Indeed.
There's worthy lives and unworthy ones. So, yeah, it rings
Well,
of
I
that
think
to me.
that very much in the film they portray it as effectively a Robin Hood type situation because it's during the Depression. I'm not saying it's right that they were seen in that way, but many of the common people, including the people at the waterhole who help them out when they're injured near the end, effectively see them as this Bonnie and Clyde, a Robin Hood type character or characters, because they're robbing from the banks, and the banks are
Nobody liked the banks.
That's right.
That's held true.
Yeah. Well, it's also, if you look at that man who was murdered from the shot in New York recently last week, and he's an executive at a health insurance company.
I don't think we should go there.
Yeah, okay, I won't go there. But
Yeah, I
a
don't
lot of
think we
people
should
have
go there. That's
Yeah, I already made an improper joke about that, so
yeah. There's nobody
just
wants to hear my
encouraging.
opinion about that, even though millions share it, but nobody seems to want to hear it. So I'm gonna
Well,
shut
And the
up.
FBI will be at your door if you talk about it.
Right,
So
exactly.
there is
Yeah,
that.
But thanks,
They-
Justin, for injecting the controversy into the show that we need.
No, you can edit it out.
that's
ratings.
what we need.
All right, so
Yeah.
we're gonna wrap up this one, and thank you for watching. And does anybody have anything to say?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Do you like what you're hearing, folks? Do you like what we're doing with these movies? Do you like the breakdowns we're giving? If so, give us a yell. Comment, subscribe,
Killer.
like, the whole 9 yards.
Yep. Thank you so much for watching. We appreciate you.
And it's true that we cannot see that far behind. If we looked all the way in the past, we'd go blind. In the night, from the stars as they've all lived their lives, and the light that they gave as they burned and then died.